In the previous two modules, which are also related with organizational setup of forensic science laboratory, part 1, part 2, we have already discussed about the different divisions of forensic science laboratory. Then we have discussed initial conditions required to accredit any forensic science laboratory. Now in this module, part 3, we will be discussing the quality assurance, proficiency testing, training and development, evidence management and their documentation. Introduction. Or in organizational setup of any ideal forensic science laboratory must meet the conditions laid down by accreditation committee specified by the NABL, that is National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration of Laboratories, in terms of personnel, training and development. Maintenance and calibrations of equipments and proper management of evidences are also very important. Laboratory should be organized and operated professionally. Let us now understand this module with the help of visuals and graphics.
Personnel. Scientific management of forensic science laboratories must have personnel with pertinent scientific qualifications and suitable forensic experience. Director. The director of the laboratory should be a person having direct operational and administrative control of the laboratory. Must have minimum qualification of MSc degree. However, it is desirable to have PhD degree and additional qualifications in management and administration with sufficient experience. Director must have sufficient knowledge about all the related fields to the scientific functions and forensic aspects of the laboratory's work, preferably through an experience as a forensic scientist. Reporting officers. Good communication skill, presence of mind, and according to NABL, the reporting officer shall have the following minimum qualifications and experience as given below for each sub-disciplines of forensic science. Chemistry and explosives. The minimum qualification of the reporting officer in chemistry should be graduate in science with chemistry as one of the subjects or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 5 years experience in relevant field or postgraduate in chemistry. Biochemistry, specialization in relevant field or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years experience in relevant field. Toxicologist must be competent to perform qualitative analysis for drugs, metabolites, and other toxic substances in biological materials. They must also be able to make a systematic search for such substances and apply appropriate extractive and separator procedures. Biology and serology. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be graduate in science with biology as one of the subjects or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field or postgraduate in any biological science, specialization in relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. Serologists must have a knowledge of basic biological sciences and sufficient knowledge of chemistry to understand the procedures used. They must also have adequate knowledge of the statistics used in forensic serology. DNA fingerprinting. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be graduate in biological science, forensic science with genetics as one of the subjects or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field or postgraduate in biological science, forensic science, specialization in genetics or relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. He or she must have knowledge of scientific literature, procedures, protocols, and practices relevant to DNA testing. They must have necessary skills to evaluate and interpret results of those tests. They must also have an adequate knowledge of population genetics and the statistics used in forensic DNA examination. Physics. The minimum qualification of the reporting officer in physics should be graduate in science with physics as one of the subjects or equivalent from the recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field or postgraduate in physics, specialization in relevant field or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. Ballistics. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be graduate in science with physics as one of the subjects or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field or postgraduate in physics, specialization in relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. Ballistic expert should have sufficient knowledge of microscopy, superior lighting methods, preparation of impressions or casts, methods of relative investigation, and the conception of individualization. They must also have adequate knowledge of the nomenclature and operation of firearms, bullet and cartridge case comparisons, powder and shot patterns, distance determination, and types of firearm determination from a discharged cartridge case or bullet. Question documents. The essential requirement of the reporting officer in question document should be a bachelor's in science with physics, chemistry, forensic science as one of the subjects, or comparable from a recognized university with minimum 5 years' experience in relevant field, or postgraduate in physics, chemistry, specialization in relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. Question document experts should possess awareness of the main beliefs of photography, microscopy, relative analysis, and individualization. They must also have a satisfactory knowledge of writing or printing instruments, process, ink, paper, and copying processes. Forensic psychology. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be postgraduate in psychology, specialization in relevant field or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years experience in relevant field. Fingerprints. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be graduate in science from a recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field, or postgraduate in science with specialization in relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years experience in relevant field. They must have adequate knowledge of comparative examination techniques, methods of processing, recovering, and presentation of latent prints. Crime scene investigation. The minimum qualification for the reporting officer shall be graduate in science from a recognized university with at least 5 years' experience in relevant field, or postgraduate in science with specialization in relevant field, or equivalent from a recognized university with at least 2 years' experience in relevant field. Crime scene investigators should possess extensive experience and be trained in the discipline. They must be competent in the application of principles of crime scene photographer, scene examination, exhibit handling, and their safety, and must have adequate knowledge of other disciplines. They should be competent to independently perform the assessment of crime scene. In addition, every reporting officer must have a good understanding of the principle, uses, and limitations of the instruments and the method and procedures applied to the tasks performed. Supporting staffs, non-testifying staff. Support staffs must fulfill the requirements of their job descriptions. The job description and the duties performed must be mentioned in black and white in agreement. New members of staff, independent of previous experience, qualifications, must have satisfactorily completed laboratories training program before being authorized to work independently. Training and development. A training program must be designed and documented for each functional area of laboratory. The training program must include the performance of competency tests in all related areas and, where relevant, the presentation of evidence in the court. Competency testing required to include an evaluation of acquaintance with the existing literature and the analysis and identification of known and unknown materials. New members of staff, whatever be their qualifications or previous experience, must have satisfactorily completed the laboratory's training program before being authorized to work independently by the director of the laboratory. Evidence management, evidence control. The forensic science laboratory must have a well-documented evidence control system. The control system is effectively designed in a way that it ensures and documents the integrity of physical evidences received. A chain of custody record, example, signature of the person, date, time, description of evidence, must be maintained so that it provides a comprehensive history of each evidence transfer over which the laboratory has control. Each individual item of evidence must be marked with unique case number designator for identification. Should the item not lend itself to marking, its proximal container must be marked. Labeling on caps, lids alone is not acceptable because of the risk of wrongly replacing the lids during batch testing of similar samples. The identification should be retained throughout the life of the item in the laboratory. Evidence must be protected from loss, cross-transfer, contamination, and or deleterious changes. When destructive tests are necessary, procedures must ensure that as much material as possible is retained for reanalysis if required. The laboratory must establish and document its policy and procedures for the retention and disposal of exhibits following the completion of examinations and or testing. Documentation, test methods and related procedures, example, used to procure samples, essential to be documented and readily available to the examiners. Where a test can be performed by more than one method, there must be documented criteria for the choice of method selected. Where suitable, the degree of correlation between the methods must be established and documented. The availability of documented methods will give the examiner the needed resource material to support written conclusions and expert testimony. Method validation. All technical procedures used by a forensic science laboratory must be fully validated before using them for casework. Validation studies can be conducted by the scientific community, as in the case of standard or published methods, or by the forensic science laboratory itself. In validating test methods, the following concerns, among others, need to be sorted out as appropriate: homogeneity of the sample, concentration ranges, matrix defects if any, interferences, specificity, stability of measured compounds, linearity range, population distribution, precision. Methods developed in-house for both qualitative works must be validated by the laboratory before use. Reference materials. Reference materials must be traceable to national and international certified standard reference materials wherever possible. Quality assurance, quality control. Analytical performance must be monitored by operating quality controls which are appropriate to the type and frequency of testing undertaken by a laboratory. The range of quality control activities available to laboratories includes the use of reference collections, certified reference materials and internally generated reference materials, statistical tables, positive and negative controls, control charts, alternative methods, repeat testing, spiked samples, standard editions and internal standards, independent checks, verification by authorized personnel. Proficiency testing. The laboratory must have a documented program of proficiency testing which measures the capability of its examiner and the reliability of its analytical results. The documentation of a laboratory's proficiency testing program must include how the test samples are obtained, prepared, who has tested them, and in what time frame, which laboratory staff member directs the program, how and where the testing information is maintained, what corrective actions are taken if required, and who oversees them. For details of approach to proficiency testing, NABL guidelines for proficiency testing based on ISO IEC Guide 113 needs to be referred. The laboratory must have documented its policies and procedures for case record view, include the technical and administrative reviews, court testimony monitoring, corrective and preventive actions. Instruments and equipments. Each major instrument equipment must be recorded in a register and the following details have to be included. Name of the instrument equipment, the manufacturer's name, type, identification, and serial number or other unique identification. Date received and date placed in service where appropriate, current location where appropriate, conditions when received, for example, new reconditioned where appropriate. Calibration. Calibration instruments equipment. All the instruments equipment should to be properly calibrated. Where equipments used for tests include equipment used for subsidiary measurements have a significant effect on the accuracy or validity of the test results. That equipment shall be calibrated or otherwise verified before being put into service and shall be subjected to a program of recalibration and or re-verification. Calibration, chemical analysis. Quality testing in a testing laboratory, particularly in the cases of its assessment, highlights the need to consider the accuracy of its measurement and analytical results and to ensure that the principles necessary to establish accuracy have not been omitted. So, the calibration of the parameters associated with chemical analysis and material tests warrants particular attention. Quality check. Under the Quality Maintenance Program, all forensic science laboratories are required to drive a program to calibrate and maintain the equipment used in the laboratory. As the equipment used in a forensic science laboratory are of diverse variety across the number of different scientific and technical fields. Microscopes should be maintained properly by cleaning and servicing periodically to get quality results. Measuring instruments like thermometers, pH meter, electronic balances, densitometers, chromatographs, spectrometers, and spectrophotometers, refractometers, autoanalyzers, and DNA sequencers needs to be maintained regularly. Legally, the forensic science laboratories must be able to validate that the item or samples examined and reported were same those submitted to the laboratory. A chain of custody record must be maintained at every cost from the receipt of items samples, which gives details of each person who takes possession of an item, or alternatively the location of that item. Example, if in storage. Reports. Report of the examination of the clue materials referred to forensic lab should be simple, illustrate, elaborative, and avoid technical terminology as far as possible. Besides this, the following information must be included in the reports of tests, examination conducted by the laboratory as per the guidelines of NABL. A title, example test certificate test report, the date of issue of the report, the name and address of the laboratory, and if different from the address, the location where tests were performed, unique identification number of the report, example by report number on each page, the page number and the total number of pages, that is page X of Y on each page, the name and address of the client, description, unambiguous identification, and date of receipt of the items tested or examined, date of performance of the test and or examination, identification of the test examination method or procedure, test examination result, reference to sampling procedures used by the laboratory where these are relevant to the validity or application results, reference to other information where this may be relevant to the validity or application of results, the name, title, and signature or equivalent identification of the persons authorized to release the report. It is accepted that forensic science laboratories may not be able to comply with all these requirements. In such cases, the record pertaining to a particular investigation must include the following information: where the results of tests not performed by the laboratory are included in reports, the source of those results must be clearly and unambiguously identified in the report. Preliminary of interim reports must be clearly specified as such. Wherever the preliminary or interim reports are delivered, the following must be recorded in the case record: the date and time of issue, the test examination results given, the name of the person to whom the results were given. A copy of the report issued for a test examination must be retained in conjunction with the case record. If, due to any reason after the issue of a report, test data related to a case are found to be invalid, the original report must be withdrawn at the earliest and, if necessary, replaced by another, which clearly indicates as being a replacement report. The laboratory policies and procedures for issuing reports must be documented. These must include: A. Prescribed formats for reports, certificates, etc. B. issue of preliminary or interim reports, C. Electronic transmission of reports, D. Retention of the reports in the case record, E. Report authorization, F. Withdrawal of invalid reports. In case of electronically generated reports, laboratory must have appropriate controls such as access, storage, and backup results and appropriate password protection. In case the report has to be accessed from the website by the customer, there must be appropriate control to ensure that the report is downloaded in protected format only. After the discussion on reports, there is a need to discuss in detail the procedures or guidelines for the following important parameters to set up a forensic science lab. Procurement of services and supplies, accommodation and safety, space, design, security, and health and safety. Subcontracting of technical work. The important parameters necessary to set up a forensic lab have been given in detail in the document NABL 113 Specific Guidelines for Accreditation of Forensic Science Laboratories and Checklist for Assessors issue number 2, issue date 28/03/2008.
Summary. Now let us summarize whatever we have learned in this module. Forensic Science Laboratory must meet the accreditation requirement specified by the NABL. The director of the laboratory should be a person having direct operational and administrative control of the laboratory. The Forensic Science Laboratory must have a well-documented evidence control room. Validation studies must be conducted regularly by a scientific community. Under the quality maintenance program, all the forensic science laboratories are required to drive a program to calibrate and maintain the equipments used in the laboratory for the analysis of evidence. Reports of the examination of the clue material referred to any forensic science laboratory should be simple, illustrative, elaborative, and as far as possible to avoid the technical terminology. Thank you.